Make sure you're here, number 5. It's there. Okay, it's 9 o'clock, let's get going. Welcome to the Wednesday, March 11th, regular Board of Directors meeting for the Elephant Butte Irrigation District. Let's start with the invocation. John.
Lord, we're grateful together here. Lord, we ask for wisdom to conduct this district's business in the best way possible. Ask for your blessing on our lives, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Director Dry, will you please give the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda, introduction of guests. Start in person.
James Revised of Irrigation District.
Eric Shipman, and online.
Certainly online today, we have Delise Maciel from EBID, J.R. Hennessy, Leah Diaz from EBID, Mike Riley. We have Dr. Phil King. We have Sarah McCartney. We have Scott Gamboa from EBID. We have Sky DeVore, and we also have Stephen Hernandez joining us this morning.
I saw Ryan said, I'm out there, I don't know if they haven't let him in here or what.
I'm sure they'll let him in shortly. He's a familiar face.
Yeah.
Okay, next, Director Clay has an announcement.
Yeah. This is perfect. Very good.
Thank you very much, John. Wow, that's remarkable. So it says an appreciation of Greg Davier for 3 years of outstanding leadership as president of the board of directors.
Thanks, sir.
Very gracious. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next on the agenda, we have public input. Dr. Shikadance.
Thank you. I'm gonna read this because I'll get off and do more than 3 minutes. But I've been reading some stuff lately that's got me upset about production agriculture and the fingers being pointed at production agriculture. And I can't seem to get anything into the Sun News anymore, so I guess you're the next best place to come to events. But thank you for the opportunity to say a few words, and I appreciate you setting up this public forum for the meeting agenda and for the increased transparency that's been shown. I have great concern about production agriculture that you and I have grown up to admire. Today, we have lost much of the ag political clout, and currently the political clout is held by the majority that does not know one thing about food production. With drought facing the majority of the 11 western states and surface water is divided up by first in time and first in right, which is formed through the large population living east of the 100th meridian. Fingers are being pointed at production agriculture, both plant and animal, for increasing problems with climate change, farting cows, pecans, alfalfa in the crosshairs, and a higher percentage of use of water by agriculture. I don't have an answer except take time to educate your city cousins and urban friends about the importance of water, food, and life. Agriculture is a cornerstone of life, and life depends upon you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shikadance. Is there any other public input? Very good. Next, we have approval of the agenda. Are there any changes that anyone would like to make to the agenda? With no dissent, we will approve the agenda and move on to board minutes. Board minutes, are there any changes to board minutes?
I just comment, Mr. President, I want to note again how much I appreciate the organization of the minutes. they continue to get easier and easier to read. I appreciate highlighting where we've taken action, as well as the headings for all of our various items. Thank you. Thank you, Director. I found 2 typos. One under manager's update, there was a missing A. Finger. I don't remember what the other one was. But I'll find it later. Okay, Mr. President, I move to approve the minutes of February 11, 2026. I have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes of the February board meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Director Garage. Any discussion? That discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and the motion passes unanimously. The minutes are accepted. Next, we have committee reports. First up is the Government Affairs Committee. So we've been developing the Government Affairs Committee now for 2 years. We made large strides last year in the amount of engagement that we had with our legislature. And much of that is thanks to Ms. DeVore's leadership and her familiarity with the legislature. And for the first time, we participated in capital outlay, and we got $580,000 for safety signage, heavy equipment, and a repeater building and tower. And we will continue to participate in capital outlay going forward. Last legislative session that just finished in February, we worked on 2 bills with our legislators and with OSC and ISC. The first is for HB 111, which increased financial penalty for illegal diversions of water. And we worked with Mr. Serrano and his team and made sure that in that bill, it was explicitly stated that over diversions would be exempt from financial penalties. We believe that this bill will protect legal agricultural use, and it is going to be a big improvement to the bill as it existed previously. The second bill we worked on was HB 247. This was a bill that was going to change the way capital outlay worked. The bill passed. We modified it though, because they were going to make it so that water projects could not be included in capital outlay. There were other provisions in the bill that remediated the issues with capital outlay. There was something like $8 billion of unspent capital outlay money. And that is certainly a problem. They put time limits on HB 247 puts time limits on how long that money can be, how long that money can not be spent for. And that by itself will remediate the issues. So so Mrs. DeVore added an amendment in committee that removed the prohibition on capital outlay for water projects, and we believe that this will both make capital outlay more effective and will continue to allow capital outlay to be used on projects that benefit our region. With regard to participating with our state government, we attended interim committee meetings last year. We attended committee dinners with water and natural resources and with some members of legislative finance. And this is something that we will continue to participate in. For next year, as I said, we will continue to participate in interim committee meetings to improve our ICIP and seek additional capital outlay funding. We will begin to apply for projects through the Water Trust Board. We will continue to build relationships with legislators at the state and federal levels. We'll organize tours for legislators, and we will strengthen our coalition of water managers in New Mexico through the New Mexico Water Resources Association. These are our goals for next year. Now, in this committee. And with that, I will hand it over to Sky to give us a brief update on legislative session.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. This year's session ended on February 19th, and it was a short session, which means the focus was primarily supposed to be on the budget and whatever the governor decided was going to be on her call. And the deadline to sign bills is today at noon. So just a few short hours away, and the things that are still big that are outstanding are the state budget and the tax package. So we won't have an update until later on that, but I'll keep the group posted. This year's budget has over $11 billion in it, but there's some big wins for water in there. The OSE budget of $22.5 million special appropriation to start water settlement implementation is in there. We worked really hard to make sure that that stayed. There's $100 million transferred to the Water Trust Fund, $13 million for the Strategic Water Reserve. And all that is in addition to their usual recurring budget of $35.5 million. So some very big wins there. As the president mentioned, we did manage to get 3 of our capital outlay projects funded, which is really great for a first year out. The sponsors are not yet listed, but I know that Representative Dow, Representative Gallegos, Representative Cadena, and Senator Brantley all contributed to our group of projects. So some very exciting things coming about there, and that money will start being available July 1 when the new fiscal year starts. One of the other bills that passed this year is a big change to the Water Project Fund. So it actually makes it easier to apply for funds from the Water Trust Board. And what the Water Trust Board traditionally funds are bigger projects that are in the millions of dollars. Last year, this last session that just passed, 114 projects applied and 113 were funded. So definitely some room in there, and House Bill 109 makes it so that legislative approval is no longer required to dole out those funds for a trial period through 2028. So we're going to continue watching that one. As the president mentioned, HB 111 passed for water penalty violations, and the OSE and sponsors were very happy about our participation. So that was a big win for us. And it was light overall on big policy changes because it was supposed to be budgetary, but we got the wins where we could, and we will continue making relationships throughout the interim, particularly as all of the House races are coming this year, and there will be a new governor no matter which side it's on. So we'll continue to monitor that. And with that, I will stand for any questions the board might have.
Board have any questions for Ms. DeWar?
Mr. President, I saw in the report that we're looking to engage more in the interim committee reports. Do you have any idea about what participation from the board at large Ms. DeWar would like, and kind of how frequently and what kind of travel commitments should we be looking to be asking our board members to do?
Mr. President and Director Davitt, that's a great question. Primarily what I look for is opportunities that are around the general area that EBID works in. So we will plan on doing something with the Water and Natural Resources Committee this year, as well as potentially something with LFC. And so those should be the 2 that we're really looking out for. But I'm also bringing attention to legislative events like the Water Leaders event, that are not necessarily interims, but water-focused events where legislators tend to be. So I would estimate that through the interim, we would have 4 to 5 events that I would ask for someone on the board or on staff to attend to have a presence.
So when you said someone, you're only gonna need a single representative from EBID at those types of events?
Potentially, if we're presenting to Water and Natural Resources as EBID, I think it would be great to have 2 board members and Mr. Smith. If we are, going to some kind of a conference where it's just a meet and greet, whoever's interested would be great. If we do an event for our area legislators, that's all about capital outlay, our priorities before the session starts or right after elections, I think as much board attendance as possible would be needed. So it just really depends on the kind of event we're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Navier. Any other questions for Mr. Moore? Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
I would also like to recognize all the efforts that Mr. Smith has been putting into the Government Affairs Committee and to relationship building with the legislature. He is doing a phenomenal job. So thank you for that. Do you have anything to add to our goals or to our performance for this last year?
Really, it's just. My key is that we participate, that we attend these meetings, which we've been doing, so thank you all for your efforts, and we're gonna step it up this year.
Rules are made by those who show up.
That's right.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
It is truly all about who you know.
Sure.
Does the board have any other comments or input with regard to goals for next year for the Government Affairs Committee? Very good. Next on the agenda is the Land Use Committee. Mr. Luke.
Good morning, Mr. President. Director Colquitt asked me to update the board on the work of the Land Use Committee. We had a meeting on March 5th where we looked at 2 items. One was a current form encroachment agreement and encroachment policy. And dealing with that first, as the board remembers, we had a license request last month related to a encroachment on an Butte Irrigation District right of way on University Avenue. From that, the Land Use Committee was tasked with approaching the board this month to give the board what policies were in place and recommended amendments to our encroachment agreement. From our meeting, we have a red line version of the encroachment agreement. What we have worked to do in terms of recommended changes to the board is have our encroachment agreement specifically incorporate the license process, provide a term for 10 years for an encroachment agreement, and have those approved by the board and fees associated with those licenses paid. So we do have that available for approval for the board today. In terms of the policy itself, Mr. Gamboa provided us the policy from 1999. We are still looking at section 2 because of some scheduling items with engineering staff. We're still having them review section 2 as to the technical aspects, what they define as an ill-defined right of way. So at this time, we haven't provided a red line change to the policy itself, just the agreement, but we wanted to provide it to the board if the board had any review and comments as the Land Use Committee keeps working on this item going into next month.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Questions for Mr. Lutz? Mr. President, Mr. Dowd. Appreciate presenting the policy. When I was reading over the 1999 policy, in section 2, we appear to have 2 sections that say laterals up to 50 CFS maximum capacity. I'm thinking that second one is supposed to be laterals between 50 and 250 CFS. I'm not positive of that, but it seemed to be that we had 3 designations of laterals, those under 50 CFS, those over 250, and then the ones in between.
that appears to be a logical comment, and that's one reason why we wanted to talk more with engineering staff. So it's exactly why we brought it to the board today, but I think you're correct on that, because it seems to be the way the paragraphs are supposed to be organized.
And I believe, Mr. Lutz, that for your presentation, that the land use committee is recommending approval of the encroachment agreement, the form.
Yes,
Does it resolve specifically the issue that was in front of us at our last board meeting? The changes to this encroachment agreement resolve the issues there, and likely any neighboring issues that could be occurring.
it would resolve it in the sense of providing clear guidance in terms of your encroachment agreement and the license working hand in hand. In terms of the specifics of the issue that was brought before us, in looking at it over the course of the last month, what we determined was the individuals that were here do have an encroachment on our right of way, but EBID does not actually own the underlying land. So there was discussion of, you know, whether we could have the relinquishment policy in play. I don't think that would help the landowners. Because we only have an easement on University Avenue. The land is actually owned either by the state or the city. The second point is researching it further, it appears further down University, there may be additional property owners that may have similar encroachments. And we discussed as the committee whether we want to approach all of them when we have this agreement structure in place and see if we can resolve everything in that particular area. Josh, is that fair summation?
Mr. President. Yeah, so the issue is, I don't know that we've determined ownership of that property yet, have we? Whether we own it or whether the state does, but it appears that the state, because that is a state highway, does. So we have the neighboring property who's also encroaching, and then it appears there's at least two more properties on the same right of way that are encroaching. My concern is that if we enforce this against one property owner, we need to enforce it equally against all property owners. We shouldn't penalize the Loves because they actually came to us to try and resolve their issue while everyone else has remained silent. So as far as clearing up the issue, I think that the clarity is if they want to sell their property and the title company is going to require this encroachment to be corrected, it requires the encroachment to be corrected, not just an agreement.
And Mr. President, to be sure I understand the terms, corrected means presumably putting their infrastructure on their own property.
Removing their infrastructure from our right of way.
Right.
Or conveying.
I yield.
I would just say, I have had good experiences with, for example, Southwestern Abstract and Title, where they have accepted encroachment agreements like this to close transactions. Some underwriters may be more strict, and it probably depends on the level of the encroachment. I would believe on something like this, which appears to be kind of minimal, you know, a title company would accept the agreement, but I could be proven wrong.
Thank you. And Mr. Lutz and Mr. Smith, thank you very much for those clarifications. And there was something in there I had not heard before. I was not aware that EBID had any infrastructure where we did not have title to the right of way, with potential exceptions of where like the railroad right of way crosses our right of way and there's a weird conflict of right of ways. Roads have not been something that I've been aware of where there could be a different department of the government that has a right of way that conflicts with ours. Is this the only place this occurs? It's the first time I've ever heard of it as potentially not having title. to our infrastructure.
And I made this comment, I hope I haven't created confusion. I think the idea is that we don't own the underlying land. We have the right of way and our infrastructure is in the right of way and we have ownership of that right of way. But we actually don't own the underlying land. And I believe there are a number of places within the county where that is the case.
Okay, so we have a right of way, we don't have an easement.
Well, I think the right of way is.
Are they the same?
Same, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, does this encroachment agreement cover both where we have title to the underlying land and where we simply have a right of way? Is this encroachment agreement sufficient for both of those categories, or do we need separate ones?
I believe it's sufficient for both of those.
Thank you. Those are the questions I have, Mr. President. Thank you, Director Dolly. Director Fletcher.
Mr. President, I'm acquainted with the love, and not total stranger, and I know Mr. Flynn. So I wanted to look at it, and they showed me what the deal was. But it appears there are probably a total of 5 properties that are in the same boat. I think somebody built a fence up there, and the next guy said, "Oh, there's the edge of the property," so he kept going, you know.
Thank you, Director Fletcher. Any other comment from the board? Mr. President, I move to approve the form of the encroachment agreement. I have a motion on the floor from Director Dalby to approve the modifications made to the encroachment agreement.
One second.
Second from Director 8.
Thank you, Director Colquitt. Now, a motion on the floor by Director Dalby to the form for the encroachment agreement, seconded by Director Garai. Any comment? With that, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it. The motion carries.
And Mr. President, with respect to the second item before the land use committee, the Zia Gas blanket agreement, excuse me. We have made contact with Zia Gas. We are looking to have an in-person meeting with representatives of Zia Gas the week of March 23rd. We've designated through the land use committee the individuals we'd like to be at that meeting. Director Colquitt, myself, Zach Livin, our engineer, Scott Gamboa, and one or two others I don't forget. Of course, Josh always has an open invitation. We're just gonna get a date and hopefully be in a position to have that for board approval next month.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any further questions for land use committee? That we will move on to the water resource committee report. Director Garai.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Water Resource Committee met on March 6th. President was Henry Ludwig, myself, Randy Garai, board members, Josh Smith and James Norlias, staff from EBID, and Dr. King, our EBID consultant. We convened at 1 p.m. Discussion was on the allocation. Dr. King updated the committee on the initial Rio Grande project allocation following a meeting of the allocation committee on March 3rd. Dr. King explained that a diversion ratio of 0.64 was used to be conservative, as we will very likely receive very little additional inflow this season, and the diversion ratio estimate is subject to error. EBID had 18,274 acre feet of carryover for 2025, and EP number 1 had 34,530 acre feet carryover. The allocation contemplates a seasonal release from Cavallo, 222,386 acre feet. The initial allocations to districts are 63,855 acre feet to EBID and 69,234 acre feet to EP number 1. The allocation of the current year's water, 139,880 feet, is so low that the allocation to the two districts is 57% to EBID and 43% to EP number 1, rather than using the D2 curve. Mexico's allocation is 9,239 acre feet. On the allotment, using a conveyance efficiency of 55%, as is commonly done for allotment estimates, would suggest an allotment of 4.6 inches. James Narvaez and Dr. King recommended 4 inches because of the uncertainty in diversion ratio and conveyance efficiency in such a low supply year. The fraction over 4 inches would also create operational headaches as well as concerns for farmers trying to use all their surface water. Josh Smith and Director Ryan Ludwig concurred. The committee will recommend a 4-inch initial allotment to the board. Another thing brought up was copper mine. Dr. King is still not heard anything from the Newcastle Copper Company about plans for copper flats. Water outlook. NRCS forecast for March 1st, 2026. Estimating the unregulated March through July spring runoff has gone down from the February 1st forecast. The 50% exceedance probability estimate for flow at Otoe went down from 200,000 acre feet, which is 35% of the median in the February forecast, to 195,000 acre feet in the March forecast. The 50% exceedance probability for San Marcial went from 20,000 acre feet, 20% to 15,000 acre feet, 15%. Finish following up. The Water Resource Committee will recommend an initial allotment for the 2026 irrigation of 4 inches. That was concluded our meeting. We adjourned at 1:30, Mr. President.
Director Dry. Questions for Director Dry? Mr. President, Director Dry. Mr. President, I want to note that I was not present at the March 6th meeting. I apologize for my unavailability. I expressed to the chairman my support for the 4-inch allotment. I also, it's not in this report. We haven't discussed the release date, but I'd expressed my support for a June 1st release date prior to the Water Resources Committee meeting. When I read the report, with regards to the water outlook, it said San Marcial went from 20,000 to 2,000 acre feet, and that was 20%, 15% of median. I believe that's supposed to be 5 and 4% of median. 15% of median would imply a 100,000 acre foot inflow being the median. That's not the case. So I think you're right. Yeah. And so just a point of clarification, we're at the current NRCS forecast is 4% of the median being our spring runoff. It is.
And I will cover that in the water update.
Thank you, Dr. King. I appreciate the opportunity for comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. King. Sabres is winning.
Oh, goodness, I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna lose bad. Then with that, we will move on to actually one thing. Do we want to keep Copper Flat Mine under the purview of Water Resources, or should we completely move that over to legal review?
I believe it's already moved to legal review.
That's my understanding as well, Mr. President. I agree. Then in that case, we should no longer discuss it in the context of Water Resources and exclusively discuss it in the context of legal review. Mr. Frangel.
I know I'm jumping the gun, but we probably want to set the dates for the growers meetings here in the near future. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Frangel. Next on the agenda is the Water Resource Report, Dr. King.
Good morning. Are you seeing and hearing things okay at your end?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump right in. I think this time I am the opening act for James. But let's get started. This is our status as of March 9th. We had 243,000 in Elephant Butte, 16 in Cavallo, for a total of about 260,000 acre feet in storage. Rio Grande Compact Credit Water, you'll notice that this went up about 4,000 and change from my estimate last month. But this is the number that Reclamation provided for our initial allocation, so that's the one I'm using. Keep in mind that once this will be finalized at the Rio Grande Compact Commission meeting next month. And once it is finalized at that meeting, it will remain constant for the entire year. We had about 3,900 in of San Juan Chama water. That is also not releasable because it is non-native water. So we've got a total there of about 14,000 acre feet that we can't release. We've got usable project storage then, which is the total storage minus the credit water and San Juan Chama water of about 246,000. We've got about 18,000 by the Bureau's calculation of not releasable water then, or the Bureau's method. And so for the season, we've got about 228,000 acre feet to release. The net inflow right now is about 650. If you recall last month, I think that was around 1,000 or 900 acre feet per day. It is in decline, and we'll take a look at that right now. This is a graph. I showed you this. I think I started on this last month, but I think it's a useful indicator. This goes back to October 1st, which is the beginning of the traditional water year, not the calendar year, but the water year. You'll notice that we had this big surge in inflow, which is the orange line is inflow in acre feet per day. The blue line is total storage, so it's basically the cumulative sum or the integral of the orange line. And it's been pretty good. And what is happening is we're losing a lot of the low elevation snow is melting early. And for this period, it came down and Middle Rio Grande was not on to divert any of it. So we got in a good bit of water before they came on. They have come on now, and you'll notice that right here about the beginning of March, there's a little break and slope there, a little drop in the river here. This last spike was counteracted this morning by a -1. That's kind of the way these daily inflow measurements work. It's the difference in storage between 2 days, and you get big errors that cancel each other out over time. But the river certainly is in decline now. MRGCD has come on. The Albuquerque Water Utility has come on and is diverting, last I looked, about 90 CFS. So, and there's going to be a general decrease in the inflow anyhow. So this is where the river begins to dive. You can see it a little bit at San Marcial, but still there's a lot of noise in it. This is the floodway at San Marcial, which is the river channel. You see it did dive, come back a little bit, and there's so much going on upstream. As Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District starts to come on, they're basically charging up their canals, so a lot of it wastes back to the river, and it can create a divot like that until the return hits. There's just a lot going on upstream, so it's still noisy. But the general trend is obviously from this nice, steady, stair-stepping kind of a release to a general decline. Looking at the precipitation, we are not alone in our snow woes. The Rio Grande watershed is right here where we've got the headwaters, the upper Rio Grande, the Rio Grande Elephant Butte, and Rio Grande Caballo. And you see that we're in a tough neighborhood right now. This is west wide, really. There's some wet spots when you go further north and west, but for our region of the Southwest here, it's looking pretty abysmal right now. We are well below average on the snow water equivalent. None of this has changed. This is sort of bounced around. I think the Rio Grande headwaters went up slightly due to a little system, and you'll see that on the next slide that came through recently. But everybody else is down. Total precipitation is down from last month. So it's, we're definitely headed in the wrong direction, which is one of the reasons we are going to play on the side of caution when it comes to both allocation and allotment. These are snow tracks from, pardon me, from the upper one, and let me get this fixed. The upper one is Wolf Creek Summit, and that is in the Rio Grande headwaters. The lower one is Bateman, which is lower latitude. It's in the upper Rio Grande, which is south of the Colorado state line and lower elevation. And you see that little kick up right there at just in this month. That was a storm system that came through that hit the headwaters, but did not really contribute much, maybe a little bit down here to the upper Rio Grande. When you see that we're basically flatlining up here in the headwaters and in the upper Rio Grande, which again is Colorado state line to Otoe Gauge, we're actually losing snow. That's that early low elevation snow melt I was talking about. Little blip there, but we could easily be out of the shading. And let me explain the shading real quick. The top of the shaded region is the highest for each day of the year that it's been in the last 30, in the period 1991 to 2020, regardless of what year it happened in. It's just the highest for each day. The red is the lowest for each day. And so the top line and the bottom line are made up of multiple years. It's just the best it's ever been and the worst it's ever been. And as you see, we're headed for the worst it's ever been, certainly in the at Bateman here, and similarly in the whole upper Rio Grande. So it's one of those years. The color coding, by the way, is low Earth 20 percentile, 20 to 40 percentile, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 to 100 percentile. So we're dancing around mostly in the 20 to 40, but getting into the 0 to 20th percentile on these. Same old, hot and dry, dry and hot, whichever way you want to look at it. This is almost a month old, but it's such a stable pattern. I don't expect it to change significantly. One thing I will tell you is that this does not tell you how far below normal the precipitation will be, just the likelihood that it will be below normal, so that it is very likely to be below normal through much of the Rio Grande watershed and above normal on the temperature. And that's exactly what we've been seeing. What this says is expect that to continue. The drought outlook is, this is February 28th when this was released, but it's for March through May. And what you see is that if it isn't drought persisting, it is drought development likely. And that is because of the precipitation that we had. These yellow areas haven't quite made it into a strict drought classification just yet, but they're certainly headed that way. In which case, all that area that you saw in red on the SNOTEL snow water equivalent map, it's all going to be classified in drought within this period. Okay, I we'll have to go back and check, make sure I got the numbers in Director Garai's report correct. But this is the March 1st report on the again, I won't go into too much explanation. I tend to spend too much time on this because I used to teach statistical hydrology. But what this is saying, let's just focus on the 50th percentile, or sorry, the 50% exceedance probability. This is saying that we've got a 50% chance of getting at least 195,000 acre feet at Otoe gauge, and a 50% chance of getting 15.3 or more thousand acre feet, so 15,300 acre feet at San Marcial, which corresponds to 35% of median flow at Otoe gauge, and only 4%, as Director Davier mentioned, 4% at San Marcial. If you track San Marcial in the January forecast, they said 20%, and that's when Director Davier and I entered into our little side bet. That went down to, I believe it was 16% in the February forecast. No, 6% in the February forecast, and now it's down to 4%. You'll notice that it can go negative, which again is sort of an artifact of the forecasting method they use. It's a regression model, so it doesn't know it can't go negative. But we're getting, very close to zero. We are into March, and we have gotten some flow this month, so it will not be zero, at least the actual. This is for unregulated flow. I believe unregulated flow will also show it doesn't go negative. The river is not flowing backwards at San Marcial. Okay, this is the summary of the allocation, and I do have the allocation spreadsheet queued up if anybody would like to dive into the details. But as of March 1st, we had a seasonal supply, and that is the total storage minus the San Juan Chama and Rio Grande compact credit water of 10,000 acre feet, minus minimum pools and evaporation. We had 22,000 at that point. That gives, using the D1 relationship, that gives Mexico an allocation of 9,239. We had 139,880, which Director Garay referred to also. That's this year's water that we have to allocate. And what happens is that is the amount of water in storage of the actual divertible water that comes from that. EP1 will get about 35,000, EBID will get about 46,000, and that does break down to exactly the 57-43 ratio of the acreage in the two districts. So this is pro rata on this year's water. EP1 came in with 34,500 acre feet of carryover, so they have a total of 69,234. EBID came in with 18,274. Plus, with this year's allocation, that gives us 63,855. The method that James and I rely on, we take that total allocation and spread it out over 90,640 acres. We assume a conveyance efficiency of about 55%, and I'll talk about that in a minute, which in theory would give us a 4.6 inch allotment if we were paying no attention to what else is going on. However, we do not run at 55% efficiency. What we have found is that we actually deliver about 85% of the total water that we allot. So if you take whatever the allotment is times 90,640 acres, we deliver about 85% of that, and it varies dramatically from year to year. Also, we are assuming a diversion ratio of 0.64. And I use a regression equation to make an initial estimate of that, which is based on the current year's release and what last year's allotment was. Because last year's allotment is an indicator of how much groundwater we used, what kind of condition the groundwater will be in. However, that estimate has a standard error of about 17,000 acre feet of diversion. And 17,000 acre feet, if we're running 600,000 acre feet in a year, it doesn't matter that much. But in a year like this, that's that's a large portion of the water we have to use. So approaching this cautiously. The other thing before I move off this slide, we are also applying a drought factor of 0.88, which is due to the fact that last year was below 400,000 acre feet, and this year is below 400,000 acre feet. Therefore, we will apply that drought factor to the D2 value that is used to allocate water to EP1. In this particular year, that puts the D2 times 0.88 is lower than 5743 allocation. So we're going with the 5743. Again, if anybody wants to dive into the weeds, we can, but you do so at your peril. Okay, so once again, that is difficult to estimate that, a 17,000 acre foot standard error. And if you're not familiar with standard error, it's the regression equivalent of a standard deviation for point value statistics. We're going to have very high losses between release and diversion. We know that. It's a little bit iffy as to just how high. They can surprise you either direction. You can run more efficiently than you expected. You can run way less efficiently than you expected in terms of release from Caballo to diversion from the river. The one thing you can just about guarantee is that you won't get it right sitting here in March. We do not expect much new inflows. I showed you the rivers going down. If we do get significant inflow, it's probably going to come in the monsoon season, and we will be winding down and too late to really do much with it in this season. If we do get monsoon inflow into the reservoir, it'll be there for us next year. But again, there's no strong indication that that's on the way. Now, I said 4.6 inches in our discussion. When I first talked to James about it, we both looked at the number, did our calculation, and said, yeah, 4 inches. And that's me looking at it from a systems level primarily, and James looking at it primarily from an operations level. And then when we discussed it with the Water Resource Committee, they said, yeah, 4 inches, because from a farmer's perspective. So 4 inches is where we land. And so that would be the recommendation that Director Garay referred to. With that, I would leave it open to questions.
Thank you, Dr. King. Questions from the board? So I have a question. Right now, we're planning on setting an initial allotment. But with regard to the release date, do you know when EP1 and Mexico are planning to request release?
Mexico does not request release. EP1 is on board with May 29th. And we do May 29th. That's a Friday. So we have the weekend to advance it down. And then we start to pick up that first week of June.
any other questions or comments on release date?
Mr. President, yeah, I continue to get inquiries from our members about moving the release date up from the 1st of June as a standard. And moving it up to the middle of May. The two principal reasons that I'm given, in our spring vegetable crops, getting water out a couple weeks earlier makes a difference to them. And then the second is to spread out the traffic jam of demand that occurs on or about the 1st of June. We've discussed this many times. I have a question for Mr. Smith, which is maintenance operations. Are maintenance operations still going to be in the system in the middle of May?
Yes.
That obviously creates an issue for even considering this year. Dr. King, what are the impacts of, should our cousin district choose to want releases on the 1st of June? If our district chose to release water earlier than that, what are the impacts to the allocation committee for EBID coming on earlier than our cousin district?
It depends in large part on what Mexico chooses to do. And this gets into kind of a touchy area. Mexico can take water when it's in the vicinity of El Paso, Texas. Now, if Mexico comes on, we would be on diversion accounting. If Mexico does not come on, we would be on release accounting for that period, and we would eat the hydrologic cost of starting up the system, which would be horrendous. If EP1 is not coming on, we have to start out, let's see, is that right? Well, we would have to time the release so that the advance down the river, well, if Mexico comes on, then we got to push it down. So we would be pushing water down to Mexico without EP1 on. So we would have higher proportional losses during that period. And so that would hurt us even on the diversion accounting.
Thanks, Dr. King. And to be sure I understand the clarification, if the State Department determines that Mesilla Diversion Dam is in the vicinity of El Paso, then Mexico can call for its water at that time. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And I don't know if Mesilla Dam counts, well, again, we would almost hope that they do, so that we would at least be on diversion accounting, but it's going to crater the diversion ratio still. Because we're not writing off El Paso delivery in covering those losses.
Thank you, Dr. King. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm interested in the opinions of the other board members. Director Glacial. Thank you.
My one thought is that'd really screw the cotton guys, because they're not gonna get to use their water. It'll be gone before they can come back to irrigate the second pound of cotton.
Does it get them for the not growing cotton? I don't know when they would be demand for water. Does moving it back allow them to irrigate the first irrigation with the water instead?
No, a lot of those guys be irrigating. I think some are irrigating now. The next few days, most of them will be burning water.
Director Dry.
With 4 inches, starting up early, in the north end, our losses will be huge. There's not enough demand for the onions to justify running the water to keep them wet. And what do you do with the water when they can't irrigate every day? You can't stop. Once you start, our losses will be huge. Correct me if I'm wrong, James.
Most of them won't be able to use the water because they'll already be harvested,
Yeah.
like half of them.
That,
Director Ludwig.
My question is to James. If we were starting mid-May, we'd be done by mid-June
With all of the factors that Dr. King mentioned, if we didn't have, if EP number one, we're trying to stick to their guns, and the bad part of it, we could be done sooner than that, because now we're taking a hit on the allocation, not just the allotment. Because we're gonna be charged quite a bit of water to get water there, so. But if they were to come on, it'd be pretty much the same stretch. However, that's where you run into the issue of the demand. Where the demand is, cotton would be. We won't be able to hit that last week of June when they normally come in with the big request to get their first watering. I guess with surface water if we start June first, so we'll lose that. And they won't have the opportunity. Then we'll be spreading water, which is not during 4 inches, we gotta go full max. You cannot spread because it's gone. Efficiency just goes.
Thank you, Director Ludwig. It is my view that a June 1st release date is the middle ground. We have debated this every year since I've been on the board. We know that it's too late for a lot of the vegetable guys, and we know that it's too early for a lot of the cotton guys. And I think that this is the compromised solution. Is there any further debate on the release date and on the the allocation? It says 4-inch allocation, that should be 4-inch allotment, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I just want, Mr. President, I appreciate the explanations from my colleagues. And I just want to be sure that I understand it correctly. So for our fresh vegetable crops. Yeah, I've heard some of our members show up at this meeting saying that a couple weeks makes a difference. But I'm hearing today that I'm misunderstanding that those couple weeks actually aren't going to provide utility.
it does make a big difference, but the 4 inches. He's gonna have to keep the drains wet, the canals and the laterals wet. He's gonna go slow, or conveyance losses are gonna be huge. That's the only thing. If we had 12 inches, I mean, I'm all on for starting early, but with 4 inches, it's just too hard to do. You've heard him say before, when we have 4 inches, we gotta run fast and furious, be as quick and as efficient as possible. When you have to spread that water out, we're gonna lose. Everybody's gonna lose. Not just the vegetable farmers.
Thank you, Director Wright. Now, if I remember correctly, did we have a draft or did we have a formula for when we were going to release based on the law?
Doesn't have a decision tree. And I believe that was adopted.
I don't believe that it was. I believe the decision tree was in draft form and we did not get to the point of adopting it in policy. Although I think that is my opinion, that is the direction that we should be going so that we're not ad hoc deciding this every year. And that the debate on how we should structure that occurs at that policy level as opposed to occurring when we're looking at short supply and trying to figure out how best to manage it.
With the narrative published to everybody.
Correct. And if I may, Mr. President, I want to try to be sure I understand the second side of it, because there's concern about loading everything up together with cotton demand, along with all the other crops, and trying to time it right so that both of those demands can be satisfied. How much demand do we have for cotton
currently? Does anyone know?
No, not
Is
this
it
time.
1,000 acres? Is it 20,000
I
acres?
mean, even for the past few years, we've been averaging around 7,000 acres, 8,000 acres.
Mr. Chairman, just looking, the last 5 years, this is up to 2024. Cotton has been averaging about 9,000 acres and vegetables combined is about 6,000 acres.
The asset management plan outlines the last 5 years as well.
Thank you, Mr. Pranzer. Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Director Davier. Director Glacial, and then, Mr. Narvaez.
Just two comments. First of all, we started June and July. A lot of guys are already have their water used because cotton's generally start June 15th to the end of June. So a lot of the water's gonna be already out of the way. We're only gonna get less than one irrigation. The other comment is due to the fact that the state has taken quite a bit of open land out of production, it's gonna skew all of our numbers that were used in the past. Because that land's not gonna get certain water.
Thank you, Director Glacial. Mr. Narvaez.
I would just comment that this, knowing that we have this right now, this early season, that you were to make the 4-inch allotment, it's a lot of preparing that the farmer can do ahead of time. Because normally when we're getting this drastic of an allotment, we wait till May at the last minute to decide what we're gonna do. And by that time, there's already patterns and things set, which can cause collisions worse than trying to finish. But if we make this announcement sooner that this is what you got, we don't know the start date, but estimated June 1st, a lot of planning goes into that, so that we can be more efficient with the demand. So that's important to me that we do something sooner than later, because it's helpful for planning. That's phone call.
Thank you, Mr. Narvaez. Do you have a report for us today?
No, just here to answer questions and about the recommendation.
Are there any other questions or comments or discussion on the release date and on the allotment? That I will accept a motion to set a allotment and the release date.
Mr. President.
Mr. Davier.
Mr. President, I move to set a 4-inch allotment based on recommendations from the Water Resources Committee. I also move to set our release date to correspond with our sister district to maximize the amount of water that we can divert as EBID.
Thank you, Mr. Davier. I have a motion on the floor to set the allotment to 4 inches and to set the release date to correspond with the release date of EP1.
I second this.
I have a second by Director Garai. Any further discussion? With that discussion is closed, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. The opinion of the president, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The allotment will be 4 inches and the release date will be 2026. Thank you, Mr. Narvaez. Thank you, Dr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The next item on our agenda is staff report, starting with general and administrative, Ms. Brandon.
Okay, so gonna go over the cash report. Oh, I thought it was shared. I'm sorry. Thank you. So, few highlights here. Cash balance is, still continues to trend better year over year. We'll probably get a little bit closer to last year towards the end of the year as we spend down a lot. There's going to be, some upcoming grant reimbursement requests that we're going to have. And so, we're pretty heavy on cash. I think, we'll continue to see improvements over the next 5 years. This is just going to be one of those years where we got to invest. We got to use cash to, get the system right, get our operational efficiencies, get our new software, and, set the district on a path that's, best going forward. Cash is $970,000. This is due to salaries and wages. And we issued some grant reimbursement of approximately, I believe it's somewhere around, well, here it is, 246,000, I think. This month we did around 200,000 for requests. There were still some outstanding, I believe, from the prior month. I could be wrong on that, but 240, 250,000, I'll get into that in a second. Interest, you know, interest rates are down. If you look here, they're around 3.66%. And so we weren't getting the 7% interest that we were getting, but we're still getting some investment. We're making return on our money, which is a good thing for the district. Year to date, we've received about 88% of our assessments. Whenever we hopefully slow down with a lot of the stuff and get some stuff wrapped up, in the finance department, we're going to take a deep dive into that and kind of track attrition rates and kind of see where we're going to shake out kind of come this year. The weary grant payments right here, you guys might be wondering about that. I drafted some proposals for people who reached out for that program. It was on-farm efficiency slash ag land related efficiency. So things such as solar powered wells. We got, I believe, around 600,000 in total award. A lot of our grantees are going to be under that. We've processed some reimbursement. I believe we received around 70,000, as you can see here at the bottom, and waiting on Rafa to get his invoices in so I can write him a check and reimburse him, and that's going to be approximately 250,000. And so the district is going out. We're doing a good thing. We're helping farmers out. We're, helping them with the process. Obviously, not enough because they're doing all the work, but we're kind of the fiduciary for the money. And so, we reimburse them for their grant proceeds, and then we in turn get reimbursed. So the district kind of nets out to zero. We're just doing something for the community. I believe the rumor is that they're gonna double this program. So, again, I'm gonna ask you guys to start reaching out now, so that way I can get the proposals out much more timely than 15 minutes before. And so, talk to your constituents in your precincts. I know a lot of your constituents are already reaching out to me for this funding. It's going to be, great. We can get a bunch of applications. I think it'll be somewhere in the ballpark of about 9 million of award. And so really reach out. We had auction proceeds of approximately 35,000. And so from a cash perspective, we're looking good. We are going to be spending down on a lot of cash. I will probably pull some funding throughout the year out to facilitate some of these purchases, consulting services, and just some things we didn't budget for throughout the year, but we're healthy. So is there any questions on cash or where the district's at, or? Yes, sir.
Would you email at least me and maybe everybody something I can print out and have in the pickup? Tell us what's covered by these weary grants. So somebody asks me, I say, look, here it is. Do you want me to make you a copy?
Yeah, I'll give you guys a handout who to contact. I believe I did that for you guys this last go round as well. So I'm happy to recreate that. The program isn't out yet. But tell people if they want some information or they want to get on some kind of a mailing list for me, that once I have the information, I can distribute that to them. Happy to do so. Anything else? Okay, sweet. I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, if that's okay, Mr. President.
Yes, please proceed.
So this is kind of a blank contract. The district has reviewed the scope of work and we went through the RFP process. This is very timely. And so what this contract is for, high level, is we're proposing 2 large-scale automation projects. One is going to be from the Leesburg heading all the way to Leesburg extension. That's going to be automating all the check structures, gates, wasteways for maximum efficiency of water. And then the other proposal is going to be retrofitting the entire Mesilla Dam and automating the west side main in conjunction with that. So that's going to be, road torque motors, telemetry, automatic gates, metering, flow stuff. So that's it at a high level. the awardee of this contract is going to give me estimates for proposals that we're doing for the DRE IRA funding. We're looking at probably in the ballpark of 7 to 8 million for these two projects. And so they're going to help provide estimates for me. Some of that has habitat components, so on and so forth. But to save y'all a board meeting and having to call a special meeting and just the timing of the RFP, if you guys were requesting authorization for Josh and I to sign this and to kind of bypass the board, so to get pre-authorization, so I can save you guys a board meeting, get this done timely, because the estimates are due the 23rd and the awardee is going to be coming here next week and performing all the estimates and everything. And so I need them on contract now so I can start coordinating with them, because I'm not able to do such unless this contract's approved. And then I can outline the scope of work. I'm prepared to go over that with you guys. If you guys want to see this, it's going to be no cost to the district unless the award for the grants that we're applying is made. Then we'll request their services and material/equipment. And I'm happy to read this scope of work. It's kind of a little one pager if you guys want the detail. If not, that'll be it.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. So this has not yet been awarded, right?
It was due.
It's awarded, but we didn't meet the time requirement for the 72-hour rule for the Open Meetings Act. And since that's the case, I'm not allowed to discuss who the awardee is, but.
So what you're requesting is to delegate signatory responsibility to staff for this contract.
Mr. President,
Mr. Smith.
we're asking for the delegation of authority to approve the low bidder or the winner of this RFP and signatory authority for the contract.
Are there questions from the board? Let's start with Mr. Lucas.
And Mr. President, I did do some legal research on just the concept that's being proposed here. The state of New Mexico, by the state purchasing agent, has a regulation 1.4.9.9 that allows exactly this type of delegation for approval and authority. Regulation has some language that I would recommend be in any motion, that the approval and signature be with quote unquote the same level of security. I think that's used to protect confidentiality, but the point being is that this is recognized in state law as something that can be done. So I feel it's appropriate. The timing was such, it was brought to my attention to where you'd either have to have a special board meeting to approve it as a board. And it's not something that I think can be pushed off to next month. So I believe it's legal to do what the defense is proposing.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Director Glacial.
If the other board members don't mind, since it's short, I'd like to hear the scope of work.
Okay, my short might be a little different, but I'm happy to read that. Okay, so Elephant Butte Irrigation District is seeking sealed bids to provide automated water control infrastructure and software. The vendor or vendors shall provide
Mr. President, Mr. Damier, if I may interrupt. That's not the scope of work that's attached to the contract.
It was attached to the RFP. It's not
different than what's attachment one.
The awardee of the contract is to operate under the scope of work I'm reading. I can give you guys copies after too.
Is the scope of work listed in attachment one of what's in our board packet incorrect?
Look, I don't think it's attached here. Is it?
There is an attachment one that has scope of work on it.
Yep, that's the same one.
So that was not what you were reading. I just want to be sure that this scope of work is what I read and prepared for. To approve, I just want to be sure that I understand what the scope of work will be on the contract.
Yes, this is the scope of work. This is the contract scope of work, slightly different than the RFP, but the scope is still the same.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Valiant.
And so I overlooked this. It is attached at the back. Essentially what this is for automated canal lateral wasteway and drain gates. There'll be meters attached to that. Flow meters installation, on laterals and key conveyance points, motors and actuators for new and existing gate structures, and then telemetry units, sensors, control hardware, and communication devices is needed to automate these facilities. And then we're going to be kind of an all-in-one software platform that can communicate with our existing telemetry and the new telemetry that's going to be installed with data management and remote manual automation. And they're also going to coordinate with our staff and their team to do the install of all of this equipment and hardware. And then they'll provide technical support and training after. And so if you guys want, my idea was I want to get awarded the money first, and then I can talk to you guys and give you guys a deep dive into what these projects are and all the various components of it. But until award's made, I really see no point in proposing these projects to you guys. But you can swing by after this board meeting and I can go over those projects and kind of what they intend to do and be.
Director Glacial.
Mr. Franzo, this is a very subjective question,
Okay.
but how susceptible to this is this equipment going to be to theft and or vandalism? Is it an attractive target? Not really.
It is not an attractive target outside of the retrofitting of Mesilla Dam, where, you know, we did some fencing and updated our house over there and it's already graffitied. I believe that since they are way down on laterals, they're not really susceptible. There is some argument for batteries with the solar power, since we don't have power to some of those boxes. They're susceptible, but they're locked boxes. They're really hard to get into. We've had very minimal issues since we switched to that design, according to our SCADA director. And so I think it's pretty minimal. I don't think anybody's going to mess with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Glacial. So, just to be sure, the RFP went out and, everything was done as usual. There were, it was open to bids and the low bidders being selected.
Correct. And the award from the review perspective has been made, but it hasn't been finalized until this contract is signed.
And all of these projects will be funded by.
The DRE IRA, correct, if awarded.
Has not yet been released to us. Is that correct?
Mr. President, the deadline to apply for these grant applications is March 26th, which is the reason for the timing issue. You don't have time to have another board meeting. So they will be providing us estimates that we can include in those applications that will be submitted the 26th. And we'll find out at some point in the future whether we can award it.
And none of that's a cost of the district.
Is this all new funding that hasn't yet been?
It's part of the original IRA 60 million that got cut down to 19 million.
This is the nitwit.
Yeah.
Okay. In general, I am in favor of these sorts of projects, and I'm in favor of delegating authority for these projects to be completed with funding from those sources.
Mr. President,
Mr. Dodge.
Mr. President, I move to delegate authority for contract for automated water control infrastructure and software under RFP 2026-01 to the manager of the district.
I have a motion on the floor to delegate approval and signature authority with the same level of security.
I accept that as a friendly amendment, Mr. President, with the same level of security.
To the manager of the district for is there a contract number?
There's an RFP 2026-01.
For RFP 2026-01. I have a second by Director Garai. Any discussion? With that discussion is closed, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. 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 The next item on our agenda is the manager's update, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you all for setting an allotment and release it early this year. I've been in contact with Mr. Serrano about coordinating our growers meetings as they will be participating in our growers meetings. We'd like to do those earlier rather than later. But I was looking at the calendar and it appears that really the only dates I have available are May 1st, 4th, and 5th, which is a Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. But I will coordinate with Mr. Serrano and our other partners and Dr. King, who we would like to be present, make sure that those dates work for everyone, and we'll get those announced and published and let everyone know when those are going to be occurring so that we can help our farmers plan and prepare for another short irrigation season. The end of February, Mr. Franzo and I went to Missouri with Chris Pauley and Aaron Ballack from the Pecos Valley Artesian Conservancy District. We went and toured Evans Equipment, which is a refurbished Caterpillar equipment, used equipment. It's a really impressive facility. And I think there's going to be some great opportunities for us to do business with Evans Equipment in the future, both leasing and potentially purchasing heavy equipment. I thought it was a good trip, good opportunity to spend some time with Mr. Pauley and Aaron Ballack. One conversation I had with Aaron and I've subsequently had with Butte is we are going to try to not necessarily revive, but start doing work as the New Mexico Water Resource Association, which is all of the irrigation districts, a couple of other parties, try to create more of a concerted effort in Santa Fe to the benefit of all the irrigation districts. So we will keep you posted as that comes about. I've already talked to Sky about it briefly, but we're going to put our lobbyists to work coordinating a meeting between all of us. And that said, last week I went to Albuquerque and attended the Lower Santa Castilla Reach Improvement meeting with Dr. King. We appreciate the Bureau of Reclamation providing us with a more detailed presentation on what they're planning for that project. And we'll talk about that a little more, I think, in closed session. We also had the opportunity to go to the the Association of Groundwater Management Districts in Roswell. President Rosa, myself, Dr. King, along with Olivia Standish, gave a 2.5-hour presentation on the Texas versus New Mexico settlement that I think was fairly well received. So
We could have gone for another 2.5 hours.
could have. As you might have determined, we are in the throes of trying to acquire quite a bit of money to improve the district. That's really our focus right now, is getting these projects out for the NIFWIC funding. Our staff is busy on designs, busy on estimates, trying to get those ready to go. I think there's a good chance that we'll be able to, or that we'll be granted at least some of these projects. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. And that's basically where we are. So, Mr. President, with your permission, I'll move on to the calendar of events.
Any questions for Mr. Smith from the board? Please proceed.
Thanks. Next week, NMSU is having an irrigation water management training. Myself, Joa, Marilyn, I think Alex, are you going to that? James are going to attend. It's a 3-day course that the university is putting on. We're also going to be working in partnership with them as they have some grant funding that they're working on that hopefully we're going to end up with some predictive software that will be useful to the district in the future. Our next board meeting is scheduled for April 8th. That has already been approved. The Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps of Engineer annual operating meeting is scheduled for April 16th in Albuquerque. You all approved travel at the last meeting. I believe some board members have expressed interest in attending that. Do we have have we locked down who is attending that, or do we still need to establish that? We approved 4 board members and
Yes, it has not been locked down. I did send out inquiries yesterday. But I believe there was some interest, for Director Davier and Ruby Rosa to attend that meeting. Dr. Clayshawns, possibly, I think the, Rio Grande Commission meeting. You said possibly tentatively you were interested, and I know Director Ludwig was interested in the, Compact Commission meeting as well.
so the operating meeting is the 16th in Albuquerque, and the compact commission meeting will be the 17th in Santa Fe. They are 2 separate meetings, so I assume if there are board members who want to attend one or the other, that's just fine. We'll have approved travel for that.
Mr. President, Mr. Davier, is the compact commission meeting, it's on the 17th, meaning that the reception is on the 16th?
Yes.
So I would suggest that those 2 meetings is the same day. And so it would not make sense to travel to the compact commission meeting and not go ahead and travel to the Army Corps meeting as well. It's a difference of a couple hours.
I need to check, but we may travel the 15th of the meeting on the 16th. I believe it starts at 8 in the morning.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I stand corrected, Mr. President. Mr. Davier.
And then, yes, the meeting on the 17th. So there is a reception, I believe, the evening of the 16th. Compact commission meeting on the 17th, and we'll likely travel the afternoon or evening 17th. Any other questions about that trip? The following week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, April 20th through the 22nd, is the Water Leaders Workshop in Ruidoso. I am planning to attend that. We've already approved travel for, I believe, of 4 board members. So, yeah, I understand Director Davier, President Ruby Rosa are planning to attend. If anyone else is interested, please let us know. We can get travel arranged for that. And the last item on our calendar is the NWRA Federal Water Issues Conference. That's April 27th through the 29th in Washington, D.C. We are requesting travel approval in the consent agenda for that trip. And that's all I have on the calendar.
Questions for Mr. Smith? Mr. President, just a comment. I'm unavailable April 27th through the 29th, but I will not be traveling to Washington. I'm planning on attending that event.
I wasn't sure if I was approved that I'll go if I can, because I think changes is one good thing.
The DC, yeah, we talked about Tuesday, so.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The next item on our agenda is the HR and safety update.
Good morning, President Ruby Rosa. This is Delise. Going over the report that's in your book, we have had a couple changes. We did have an employee resign, so our current total employee count is 84. And that does have another opening back here in the Maintenance Central. So it's a pending job opening right now. We haven't officially started it. With that, in regards to years of service, that does change our under 10 years back to 55 employees. We didn't have any specific recognition for March, but we do have several people who have years of service in March. Joseph Karpak and Manuel Andrade, his name, he goes by Kiki. They've been here 27 and 18 years. They're here in the central irrigation area. Irrigation North, Ivan Ramirez has been here 1 year. Engineering, Chuy Morales and Alex. Chuy's been here 27 years and Alex has now been here 2 years today. Leah has been here 21 years as of today. In our mechanics, and fabrication shop, we have Fernando Sanchez and Angel Navarez. And actually, Angel just moved to our dam crew as a mechanic. And then our SCADA systems, we have Kurt Geiser, who's been here 11 years. We just had 4 individuals go through defensive driving training yesterday, and we also have 2 days scheduled next week, the 17th and 18th, that will probably have about 40 of our employees going through defensive driving. This happens every 3 years. They need to go through it for our insurance. One of the other changes is our FMLA. We have another individual who is out on FMLA right now. And we have one individual who is returned from a personal injury, but is working restricted duty. So other than that, I hope everybody got through daylight savings time okay. And then just a reminder, we don't have any days off or where our office isn't closed, but I did list a couple of the upcoming holidays on the calendar. Any questions?
Board. Congratulations again, and thank you very much for all of our employees' years of service. Thank you, Ms. Maciel.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is the engineering and maintenance projects update. Mr. Franzoy.
I was asked to step in, so I'm gonna give a high level update. So the past week, engineering department in conjunction with the Office of the State Engineer did 13 dam inspections and reports for those dam inspections. That took approximately 3 days. Maintenance is currently undergoing work at the Lucero Dam. I encourage you guys to drive by it. Josh and I and engineering kind of went there after a tour we were giving, and man, it is amazing. They have moved a lot of dirt. We're cleaning those. Obviously, we can't do a full maintenance of it yet until we kind of go through our risk assessments, but it's impressive. And they're about 2 weeks out from completing that project. Engineering, as Josh mentioned, has been extremely busy with me, providing the DRE proposals, estimates, GIS drawings, meetings, all the letters of support and everything we're putting together for that. They've also scheduled a ton of LiDAR flights. We'll showcase some of that technology to you guys and kind of what we're using it for in the future. Maintenance has been busy with the ISC drain cleaning projects, and as I mentioned, the dam maintenance on the Lucero Dam. We're required to report at the end of this month, so in that April 8th meeting, I'll give you guys the same report if you guys are interested to kind of see the work, length of drains cleaned, and some of the before and after pictures of those projects. I think that's very beneficial to the board. If not, that is fine. The Las Cruces lateral is complete. And then ongoing general maintenance and structures. The heading of the Laguna is complete. They raised the school check over there, I believe by Zia, if I'm not mistaken. We ended up getting our surveys and estimates for the hatch yard extension. I'm currently working on some potential problematic areas to get that finished. And then we ordered the materials for the California project, so California extension, all of the work being done there, but a little delayed because some farmer in this room ran over our pipeline and we had to order some more, but we're good. And so that we're just getting the materials in, and obviously I'm joking, that didn't really delay our project. We just were off on the length, and so we'll get those materials in. They're already on order, and we should wrap that up here in the next couple weeks. I don't know the exact time frame, but relatively soon, and that project will be finished, and it looks great, and they've done a good job over there. So those are the engineering and maintenance updates. Yes, sir.
Where's the Lucero Dam?
So it's on Guyana Road. If you're going towards Hatch before the Blue Moon, you take that Guyana Road kind of exit. Josh could probably tell you better than me because there's a road up top there where you can get back to the dam. You know the name of that road?
It's Radium Springs, so basically just south of Radium Springs. As you turn onto Doniana Road, just south of the dam. The Lucero Dam is right there.
I would encourage you to drive out there. It is impressive.
East of the river, is that correct?
Yes. You can see it from I-25, you can really see it from I-25 now. Because all the vegetation has been removed.
Any other questions? From the board? Thank you, Mr. Franzoy. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do any board members have requests to pull items from the consent agenda? With that, I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion so made.
I have a motion on the floor by Director Wright to approve the consent agenda.
Good.
I have a second by Director Ludwig. Any discussion? With that, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. In the opinion of the president, that the ayes have it and the motion carries. That brings us to closed session. Thank you everyone for attending. I will make the motion to go into closed session.
Mr. President, I move to go into closed session to discuss the items listed on the agenda for legal update.
I have a motion on the floor to go into closed session to discuss the agenda closed session items. Second by Director Garaya. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it and motion carries. We are now in closed session.
And we're live.
I will accept the motion to come out of closed session.
Motion so made.
I have a motion on the floor by Director Glacial, seconded by Director Garaya to come out of closed session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it, and we are in open session. I will note for the record that the only matter discussed in closed session were the items identified in the motion to go into closed session, and no action was taken. Are there any additional comments for open session? With that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion so made.
I have a motion to adjourn by Director Garai, seconded by Director Glacial. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president. The ayes have it, and the meeting is adjourned. 12:25.
All right, gentlemen, good job.